Hi everyone, welcome to the Philippines New Energy System Map soft launch event. Just as an introduction to the New Energy Nexus, we're an international organization that supports clean energy entrepreneurs with funding, business accelerators and training, and also access to networks and local ecosystems. We originally started in California in the United States and now run programs across China, India, all over Southeast Asia, as well as East Africa in Uganda. The combined capital we've leveraged is 1.5 billion in investment, including all the funds that we've supported. And we've invested and supported over 1,000 clean energy enterprises around the world. Also, we've launched leading industry support programs for startups and also investment funds as well. Some of our program partners you can see on the bottom of the slide. So just to show a global map of some of the programs around the world, I mentioned our work in California, working with the California Energy Commission. In New York, we're doing a program with the New York State supporting energy efficiency in small and mid-sized buildings in New York State. We also have an office and program focused on microfinance for Pico solar products for energy access in Uganda. And a lot of our programs and offices are now in the Asia Pacific region. With China, we're working with Tsinghua University, helping them to commercialize some of their research and some of their technologies, and working with larger Chinese groups and companies. And in Southeast Asia specifically, next, we can see the programs we're running in Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. We run at least 2 accelerator cohorts in each of these countries. And in Singapore, we have set up our fund, which currently is investing into Indonesia. We're trying to grow that to be Southeast Asia wide. And we run a number of corporate innovation programs and regional programs throughout the Southeast Asia region as well. So some of the energy categories we support, clean energy generation and also operations and maintenance of assets, existing renewable energy assets, smart grid technologies. A lot of times this can encompass collecting data from existing transmission and distribution networks. Energy efficiency, this can entail energy management platforms, but also the use of IoT sensors and digitizing loads at the household, at the commercial or industrial or grid-wide level as well. We have a number of energy access companies and startups that we support. And e-mobility and energy storage is becoming a very hot topic, not only in Asia Pacific and the Philippines, but also globally. So in terms of the actual entrepreneur support services, we do a number of very early stage launch activities. This is really helping teams to create, running hackathons, working with universities to form teams, doing ideation type sessions to help students think through and commercialize and start their startup. Accelerate, really working with growth stage companies already with a number of clients, but helping them to deploy domestically and also internationally. And in terms of funds, I mentioned some of our funds in Indonesia and California, but with the markets that we don't have our own funding, we have a connection to a number of different clean tech and VC investors that we connect our startups to. In terms of scale up, this is really about corporate matchmaking, helping these young new technologies work with larger companies and multinational corporations to do their initial pilot projects, but also to come up with a more large-scale deployment plan as well. So next, I'll pass it over to my colleague Cheryl to present the new energy ecosystem map.
So the New Energy Ecosystem Mapping is a project initiated by the New Energy Nexus Philippines. The project aims to produce an interactive map, document, and database of the different key players and indicators in the Philippine new energy landscape, which includes renewable energy and energy smart technologies. Now, the ecosystem map is a practical tool for understanding the new energy landscape, identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that startups and entrepreneurs can leverage on. This map is useful for startups and entrepreneurs to identify market opportunities, what different energy innovations and business models that they can use, and to know the different support mechanisms available to them. It's useful for NGOs, incubators, and SME support organizations to understand areas of the ecosystem that need further support and strengthening. It's useful for funders and investors to recognize market opportunities and the different innovation indicators. For companies and LGUs to be conscious of other ecosystem players and explore areas for collaboration. And last but not the least, the map is also useful for energy researchers to serve as a baseline study for research and development projects in the new energy space. The concept of the new energy startup ecosystem is based on the two fundamental frameworks. First is the clean energy innovation ecosystem, which serves as the main framework and supported by the startup ecosystem. The Philippine New Energy Ecosystem is defined as the interaction of the nascent new energy assets with financing mechanisms and related institutions located in geographically concentrated area that has an enabling environment or supportive new energy policies, which encourages commercialization and networking assets to increase communication and collaboration opportunities. The nascent new energy indicators are the drivers of innovation. These indicators are characterized by the presence of startups, patents, research laboratories, universities, and media. Investors and financing mechanisms are key to the growth and commercialization of the nascent new energy assets. The funding types and levels could vary based on the size of the nascent new energy indicators and could range from bank loans to local grant providers to VC firms, crowdfunding, green bonds, and to micro cooperatives. The enabling environment encompasses the regulatory regime and or physical electricity generating characteristics of a region or the country that would favor the growth of one sector of new energy over the another. So this indicates the certification bodies, general business incentives, state and local energy policies, which also includes new energy subsidies and incentives. Institutions could play a number of different roles in both the demand and supply sides of the new energy landscape. This include electric generation companies, private distribution utilities, LGU-owned utilities, electric cooperatives, RES, contestable consumers or end users, and new energy contractors and transport cooperatives. Last but not the least, it refers to the networking assets. These are events or entities that facilitate communication and collaboration among the various actors of the ecosystem. So these are the inspirational events, capacity building initiatives, startup validation programs, fab labs, networking events, evangelists, and others. The project team shortlisted the different stakeholders and indicators of the Philippine new energy landscape. Shortlisting is based on the validation criteria and legitimacy of the source of information. Shortlisting was done for 8 weeks. After shortlisting, the entries were then mapped to the specific dimension of the ecosystem map component. The first draft of the ecosystem map was reviewed by the Southeast Asian team of the New Energy Nexus. We had a series of consultations with the different stakeholders in the energy landscape. The purpose of the consultation was to gather feedback from different experts and advocates in the energy space on how to make the map more useful for different key players in the ecosystem. Furthermore, we will hold another round of ecosystem map consultations with different stakeholders within the month. After all the consultations are done, the ecosystem map will be revised and finalized. The output of this initiative will be in the forms of an interactive ecosystem map, a document, and a database. Finally, to make the map more useful and updated, we will have a yearly updates on this ecosystem map. We spent the entire month of September this year doing consultations with different stakeholders in the energy sector. So these are the stakeholders that we talked to to improve our ecosystem map. So we have the National Renewable Energy Board, the Department of Science and Technology, PSHIERD, the ECLIA, GIZ, Institute of Climate and Sustainable Cities, CREST, Reboot Philippines, Manila Observatory, ADB Ventures, we have Clean Energy Investment Accelerator, World Resources Institute, and the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. So here's the summary of the Philippine new energy ecosystem with a total of 35 different key players and indicators in the new energy landscape. This is the second draft of the ecosystem map after we made improvements based on the feedback that we gathered from the first round of stakeholder consultations. Improvements made are in terms of the scope of the map by categorizing the stakeholders and indicators in finance, policies, and institutions into supply and demand sides of the landscape. Differentiating utility scale renewable energy, distributed renewable energy, energy access and mobility, and as well as energy efficiency. We also made improvements in terms of accessing data from offline legitimate sources and focusing on indicators relevant to energy entrepreneurs and innovators. Here's the summary of the key players and indicators that are key to the growth and commercialization of the nascent new energy assets in both the supply and demand sides of the landscape. Now, it is important to note that the presence of investors and financing mechanisms in the energy space, there are still 556 unelectrified CTUs in the country, and that regions with low electrification rate are those with less or absence of registered micro cooperatives that may provide microloans to consumers for electrification. The institutions play a number of different roles in both the demand and supply sides of the landscape. It is also interesting to note in this slide that while we have the presence of different institutions, the country has prevailing inefficiency in the energy supply subsector as reported in the Philippine Energy Sector Assessment, Strategy and Roadmap in 2018. The current energy mix is composed of coal, that's 47%, natural gas, 22%, renewable energy combining with hydro, geothermal, and wind and solar is only 24%, and oil-based, that's 6.2% in the current energy capacity of 23 gigawatts. According to the International Trade Administration, our country needs about 43 gigawatt of additional capacity that will be required by 2040. And the country is clearly behind the schedule in developing these solutions. So this inefficiency of electricity supply subsector is primarily caused by the complex and slow approval process, non-optimal market mechanisms, and as well as institutional capacity. Now, off-grid solutions such as standalone, solar, and mini-grids are instrumental and cost-effective way to provide energy access, especially to the last 10% of the population who live without electricity in rural and island areas. Now, taking the Pulse 2019 report projects that 1.25 million households can be reached through mini-grid generated electricity by 2030 if there would be 354 million US dollar invested in mini grids between now and then. 2.5 million households will have a standalone solar connections over 2020 to 2030 period, or over 35% of the new connections over that period, and this will require a total investment of 897 million US dollars to finance, of which 33 million US dollars would be utilized to address the affordability gap and provide electricity service to the most marginalized and vulnerable households. So it is very obvious that while we have existing investors and financing mechanisms and existing different institutions in our country, there is still an energy finance gap of a total of 1.251 billion. Now, how do we address the gap as reported by taking the Pulse report? So to close the energy access gap, The national stakeholders in the Philippines and international finance will need to innovate to create new financing solutions, including public-private approaches, and to encourage more institutions that will deliver power to isolated populations in low density areas. So such supportive actions that will need to be taken to facilitate investment and achieve universal electrification are the following. First, for mini grid systems. So that is to develop a comprehensive mini grid regulatory framework that encourages cooperation between cooperatives and technology providers, as well as increases access to subsidies in underserved areas. Next is to establish regulation that differentiates large-scale projects from small-scale projects to encourage broader private sector participation in this sector. For standalone solar, that is to streamline and simplify the registration process to encourage additional private participation in the standalone solar market and to improve data collection efforts in the standalone solar in the country to obtain in-depth and up-to-date market data for both companies and consumers. To explain the next dimension of the new energy ecosystem map, I would like to call my colleague, Hilda Carrion, who will talk about ways to increase the number of energy startups and democratizing renewable energy.
Thank you, Prof. Cheryl. It is interesting to see each dimension of the ecosystem map and what the data is telling us. As ecosystem builders, same with our audience today, it's important to understand our landscape and the different stakeholders and indicators that determine our pipeline of energy entrepreneurs and startups. To help us understand the results of the map that we have here, we have, wait, ulit. nawala ako. Do I start ulit ba? At agad-agad? I think nawala ako dun sa next slide. Okay, sige. I'll restart. Thank you, Prof. Cheryl. It is interesting to see each dimension of the ecosystem map and what the data is telling us. As ecosystem builders, same with our audience today, it is important to understand our landscape and the different stakeholders and indicators that determine our pipeline of energy entrepreneurs and startups. To help us understand the results, the indicators we have mapped out are first, the startups that are in the business of energy generation, management, financing, or applications that are active for the past 6 months and recommended by a local incubator or accelerator. We also have patents from IPOFIL with the patent status listed at least as published. We also have researches from legitimate sources such as Google Scholar and DOST-funded projects. Laboratories that are supported by the Department of Science and Technology. Universities that offer formal energy education and or electives to their curriculum. And lastly is the media channels or groups that promote energy startups. With our mission to support energy entrepreneurs and startups, this indicator is the most important for us. It is glaring that the number of energy startups is very little compared to other countries and other industries. Some examples that we have here are Exora, which is a platform that connects retail electricity suppliers with contestable customers. Smarter Meter, an energy management system for households and rental businesses. Circular Solutions, a waste management system to help residential communities with clean cooking fuel from biodegradable waste. And we also have Light of Hope, which is an impact startup that provides solar generator system for low-income families. In this slide, the ecosystem map noted 240 patents published that are energy-related. While this does not include those that are filed as utility models, it is important to note that a majority of these patents are associated with private companies, and a number of them are actually foreign or international entities. This actually gives us an insight that there is a need to encourage more inventors and even universities to explore the energy sector. On research and R&D projects, while a number of them are in renewable energy and RE sources, the projects that are not purely research but extends to development and commercialization is only 12%. This is a challenge for us as startup enablers to encourage more researchers, to establish commercialization paths to their output and increase the number of energy startups and innovations. To end my thought on encouraging more energy-related researchers to venture into commercialization and further development, we want to highlight the importance of diversification and skills development, especially in business modeling and partnerships. For research teams, if you are able to include or invite someone from a different discipline, example, someone with business or marketing experience to provide insights and a different perspective, that will actually help you greatly in making your research more industry aligned. It is also important to take advantage of business skills training and other programs offered by DOSTP Shared and the TBI network, as these are specifically designed for research commercialization. Opportunities to network and collaborate with incubators are also very important to ensure that there is a steady pipeline of energy entrepreneurs and innovators in the community. So our ecosystem map has captured 11 research laboratories across the country that support energy projects and innovations. These are special labs that cater to solar PV, energy systems, bioenergy, energy harvesting, among others. For universities, we have two who offer formal energy engineering studies, which are University of the Philippines and Mariano Marcos State University. And 5 universities offer electives on energy, power, or renewable energy. Recently, the Ateneo School of Government has announced that they will be offering an energy transition track in their Masters in Public Management curriculum. As a reference to other Southeast Asian countries, Vietnam has about the same number of academic institutions that offer energy programs, and Indonesia has 11. To wrap our findings up about the nascent new energy indicators, there is definitely a need to increase capacity and educate more people about energy entrepreneurship. Be it in the academe, inventors, or researchers, these stakeholders are important pillars in the ecosystem that are perfect targets for energy skills development. For our attendees from the academe and other organizations interested in building the pipeline, we want to collaborate with you in bringing these materials to a wider audience and adding more energy startups to the ecosystem map in the future. The next area will be discussed by my colleague Paula about the energy policies and what opportunities these bring to the startups.
Thank you, Hilda. It's good to know how active and supportive our research laboratories and universities, are. On top of that, we now have New Energy Nexus that tries to bridge the gap between these stakeholders. Again, my name is Paula Valencia, and I serve as a consultant for New Energy Nexus. I'm also the Energy Transitions Analyst at the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities. My area of expertise focuses on the country's transition to renewable energy. So the Department of Energy aims to electrify 100% of the population by 2022. According to the 2017 figure, it shows that 6 out of 10 Filipinos do not have access to electricity, and only 22 out of 233 off-grid areas have access to 24/7 electricity. That's just almost 10% of the off-grid areas, and the 70% have less than 8 hours of power per day. I would like to think that the best startups are those that try to address societal issues. And in order to succeed as an energy startup in the country, one should familiarize themselves with the existing laws that enable these opportunities. To begin with, I would like to show you an overview of our power sector by discussing 3 main laws that help shape the industry. So the first is the Electric Power Industry Reform Act, or EPIRA. Signed in 2001, the law privatized our power sector. This means that unlike our neighbors in Southeast Asia, power generation, transmission, and distribution are owned and operated by private companies. The law was passed to ensure competitive energy prices with multiple players in the market and have more reliable supply and better quality of power. This also means that our government does not subsidize our electricity, which is one of the reasons why we have one of the highest power rates in Asia. The Marcos administration, although a dictatorship, heavily invested in renewable energy technologies. After that, since the country's economy was trying to recover, the next administrations allowed the pass-through provision on energy projects that transfers the risk of fuel price volatility to the consumers. This is how we attracted the investors before. So after that, we passed EPIRA in 2001. So now we have our generation facilities with mostly inflexible baseload technologies. Since the country has limited resources, we heavily rely on imported fuel. On the other hand, renewable energy resources are abundant. But because of the 60-40 equity requirement of companies, meaning 60% must be Filipino owned and the remaining 40% can be owned by foreigners, there is still challenges in incoming investments. The transmission is also operated by just one company, the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, or NGCP. They operate on the main islands of Luzon and Visayas, while Mindanao and other islands are still isolated. NGCP already has plans in place to connect Mindanao to the main power grid. This will help them lower the cost of electricity. We have our distribution companies, which are either privately owned or operated by cooperatives or local governments. Electricity is procured by these distribution utilities from generation companies, while retail electricity is sold to consumers with 750 kilowatt peak and above monthly consumption. This is under the Retail Competition and Open Access, or RCOA, while the wholesale electricity spot market, or WESM, is where excess electricity is sold. Currently, the spot market operates at an interval of 1 hour but has plans for upgrading to 5-minute intervals, hopefully by the end of the year. Next slide, please. In 2008, we passed the landmark Renewable Energy Act that aims to increase renewable energy in our power mix. Currently, we have 30% installed capacity and around 20% generated capacity for RE. We plan to increase this share with Renewables Portfolio Standards, or RPS, the Feed-in Tariff System, or FIT, and the Green Energy Option Program, or GEOP. Ralph will discuss GEOP more in detail later. Imported materials for renewable energy projects are also duty-free. While we already have incentives for RE projects in place, its percentage in the generation mix is still not increasing because there are also incentives for other fossil fuel technologies. This is something that we have to consider moving forward. Next slide, please. Just last year, after years of lobbying, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act was finally passed. This will entail establishment of an interagency energy efficiency and conservation committee and certification of energy efficiency professionals and services. And they will also require energy performance standard and labeling. Instead of just focusing on generating more power, it is also important that we save electricity, as power savings will also translate to monetary savings. Next slide, please. While the intentions are good behind these existing policies, we still have issues with implementation. This is where startup companies can come in. We have Exor Technologies, who digitize the retail electricity market. We have Smarter Meter, who makes energy efficiency technology more accessible to consumers. We have Circular Solutions, who tries to address both waste management and energy security issues. And we also have Light of Hope, who helps improve the lives of communities in off-grid areas with renewable energy. The Philippines is already on its way to energy transition, with DOE Secretary Cusi announcing a moratorium on coal last month. But we still have countless issues that need to be addressed. And we are hoping to have you that are here today to come up with innovative solutions. So to discuss upcoming mechanisms and opportunities based on these existing policies, here's our colleague, John Ralph Ebora.
Thanks, Paula, for providing an overview of our current energy policies and opportunities for startups. Now, let me discuss what are the upcoming opportunities for startups. And when I say upcoming opportunities, this will be coming from existing laws that are not yet fully implemented, and also from upcoming policies that we hope to get passed in the next few years. With that, let's start. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with something that Paula has mentioned earlier, the Green Energy Options Program, and we call it GEOP. This is a mechanism under the Renewable Energy Law, as mentioned earlier. So let's define this. Under this program, under GEOP, end users or electricity consumers will now have an option to choose renewable energy resources as their source of energy. You have to take note that under the current law, not everyone have the option to get to choose their own source of energy, may it be from renewable energy or non-renewable energy sources. So under the current law, only big end users have the option to choose their supplier. And when I say big end users, these are what we call contestable customers, or those who are having those who have an average peak demand of 750 kilowatts and above, as mentioned earlier. So, knowing that, under GEOP, eligible customers will now have a lower peak demand. So, the minimum for GEOP program is 100 kilowatts peak demand. So, what this means will is is that there will be more electricity customers that will have the option to choose renewable energy as their energy source. Okay, so before this GEOP, the only ones who can choose are the contestable customers. And what it means to startups is, well, market expansion. They will have more customer base to market. I gave Exora as an example because currently this Exora is working with contestable customers, but with JUp, they will have more customers in their platform. Let's have the next one. Next slide, please. The next one is JUp, close relative of JUp, Green Energy Auctions Policy. This is a policy intended to support and facilitate the compliance to renewable portfolio standards. Renewable portfolio standards, if you recall in a slide earlier, is a mechanism under the Renewable Energy Act. So let me define RPS first. Under RPS, electricity suppliers are required to source a portion of their supply from renewable energy. And there will be government mandated target percentage of that supply coming from renewable energy. So to give you an example, suppliers like Meralco, Veco, or Davao Light will now be required to have a certain percentage of their supply coming from renewable energy. So what it means is that what will it mean is that suppliers will be needing renewable energy from these renewable energy generators, and the latter will offer their capacity in an online auction format. Okay, so this is an upcoming one, and the auction rules and the bidding platform are both yet to be drafted, and the trial run for the auction is planned by mid of next year. Next one is EVOS, or the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop. Okay, so the energy sector is well known for its bureaucratic process, and that will become a thing of the past when the EVOS is implemented. EVOS aims to reduce the red tape in the energy sector by streamlining the permitting process, by making it fully online. Even the payment system is fully online, and all the government agencies that you need to get permit with are will be in the platform. So that permitting process and excessive red tape in the permitting process um, is a major barrier to entry to the energy sector, and most startups and SMEs will and we think that the EVOS law will open up opportunities for startups and SMEs to the energy sector. The next one is the Microgrid System Act. This is not yet a law, but still a Senate bill. But first, let me define microgrids first. No? Microgrids are the centralized group of electricity sources and loads that function autonomously. So, in other words, these are small grids that can operate on its own without necessarily connecting to the main electricity grid. And microgrids, these are the identified solution to the Philippine energy access problem. This was mentioned a bit by Paula earlier. She mentioned that almost 10% of our population still does not have access to electricity. And it is estimated that around 1.6 million households are still living in the dark. Okay, so back to the Senate bill. The objective of this bill is to remove the barriers to private sector entry so that private sector can help in the electrification. So we know that the energy sector is already privatized by APIRA, right? So this bill would make it easier for the private sector to help in the electrification by removing those barriers. So startups and NGOs that are specifically working on the energy access problem would greatly benefit if this becomes a law. I'll have one other example in the next slide. This is another bill, not yet a law, and this is a House bill on electric vehicle and charging stations. This House Bill seeks to create a national energy policy and regulatory framework for the registration of electric vehicles and establishment of electric vehicle charging stations. If this law gets passed, it will accelerate the number of electric vehicles and electric vehicle investments in the country. And startups and SMEs that are working on the clean transport sector will definitely benefit from this. That's it for me. I'll turn you over to Brenda to discuss the next part.
Thank you so much, Ralph and Paula. Indeed, these are exciting opportunities for startups and entrepreneurs in the energy sector. So with an exciting era for energy transition ahead, this really validates the importance of our role as ecosystem builders in making sure that the energy community offers the necessary support needed for energy entrepreneurs and startups. So the last component of the ecosystem map that we will be discussing today is the networking assets. So these are the different enablers, accelerators, incubators, events, evangelists that support energy entrepreneurs and startups at different stages of their development. Next slide. So we have identified several networking assets based on their profile, activity in the past 6 months to 1 year, and level of involvement and engagement with energy startups. So some notable ones are the big annual conferences such as the Future Energy Show, Solar Show, and the Asia Clean Energy Forum, where hundreds or thousands of stakeholders in the energy sector convene. Not part of the slide, but included in our map as well are actually events in the startup community, such as the Philippine Startup Week, Ignite Conference, and Slingshot. So the incubators included in the map are mostly industry agnostic, so which may or may not have a focus on clean energy or clean tech, and the accelerators are those specific to energy or clean tech startups only. Evangelists are organizations, associations, or individuals that promote or advocate energy and energy applications. So some notable ones include Reboot and Our Energy 2030, which are youth-led coalitions advocating for awareness and capacity building on renewable energy, the Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines, or EVAP, and the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. So while there is an interesting level of activity in this space to prepare us for the massive energy transition, to help to prepare us for this and to help our country increase our global innovation index, we still need to also increase our efforts in helping more startups explore the energy sector and encourage more people and teams to be energy entrepreneurs. So next slide. And to help us with this, we want to share this material that we have carefully curated from experiences and learnings of over 90 clean tech accelerators across the globe. The accelerator in a box is a handy toolkit that helps incubators and accelerators design programs for clean tech and clean energy startups. So this includes guides for running hackathons, boot camps, early stage incubation, and later stage acceleration programs. So really our goal is to empower more organizations to train, capacitate, and support energy startups who will then help us accelerate the country's transition to clean energy through innovation. We found that it is necessary to offer this material and support to other sectors because of the perception that clean tech or clean energy is a difficult space to be in. And this is something that we are very much well aware of. Next slide. People actually associate clean tech with hardware products where pilot projects will entail years of research and product development. Thus, supporting startups in this space will entail a lot of capital or resources. From what we have learned also earlier, there are several institutional barriers, and the energy sector being highly regulated is also a challenge for new market entrants and startups. And then lastly, there's also a notion that it is more attractive or easier to support software apps because of their ability to scale compared to clean tech projects. But we have to, we have to recognize that times are changing, and as we have seen in previous opportunities presented by Ralph and Paula, the energy revolution has begun, and there is not a better time than now to actually start supporting energy innovations and startups. Next slide. First is, let's say, on the cost of pilot projects. So it is important to note that energy authorities have noted that the cost of renewable energy has been declining, and the cost of solar PV and onshore wind is actually cheaper than coal. So even cost of batteries and other clean energy equipment has started to decline, making investments in projects and innovations actually easier and more exciting. Second, we're not turning a blind eye on the level of complication and regulation in the energy sector. But what we want to highlight is that there's also a vast number of opportunities for innovation and startups in this space, no, as was discussed earlier, like the renewable energy law. No, these are policies that encourage retail competition and opportunities actually for, let's say, for digital procurement or e-commerce. The Green Energy Options Program, EVOS, no, and the recent announcement of the Department of Energy on the moratorium of upcoming coal projects. So this is just a validation that while there are institutional barriers, there are also clear signs of opportunities for new entrants. And then lastly, energy startups may not just be limited to energy harvesting equipment, no, or resources which are heavy on capital. On a study from the International Renewable Energy Agency, aside from business model innovations, there are a number of applications for the energy sector for technologies such as AI and IoT. So, for example, using networks of sensors through appliances and devices for optimized energy consumption, cryptocurrency to reduce disputed energy transactions for quicker processing of payments for the different utility companies or electric cooperatives. And then you also have augmented and virtual reality in improving efficiency of energy companies in getting information from the field quickly. So there's a lot of intersections from upcoming and ongoing trends in digital and in the tech sector that may be applied for energy. So next slide. To end this, the ecosystem map is a platform and a tool that we want to be available to anyone and everyone who wants to be part of building the energy entrepreneurship community. So if you have comments, questions, feedback, or you want to help us out with building this map, please connect with us at philippines@newenergynexus.com. Next slide. Before we end, just a short invitation for a program that we are launching in partnership with Crest and Open Solar. The Solar Innovation Program is an acceleration program for small-scale solar PV companies who are interested in building their capacity and skills in entrepreneurship, business management, and innovation. We are having a webinar 3 days from now on November 26th about this. So if you or you know anyone or someone who might be interested, please follow our Facebook page, New Energy Nexus SEA or New Energy Nexus South Asia. Thank you, everyone, and may you have a great day and great week ahead.